Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to cut through the noise and hopefully bring you some clarity on big topics.
Yeah, and today's topic is definitely one of those.
Absolutely. We're diving into feminism. You know, it's funny, most people you ask them, they'll say, oh yeah, gender equality, that's important, a modern ideal.
Right. Pretty much everyone agrees on the concept.
But then you use the word feminism, and suddenly
Yeah.
things get tense. You get these really strong reactions, often quite conflicting ones.
It's a huge disconnect, isn't it, between the idea equality and the label for the movement aiming for it.
Exactly. So that's what we're exploring today, this complex, often really misunderstood landscape around feminism.
And we've got some pretty diverse sources to draw on. There's a big report from the A-Line platform.
Yeah, plus articles from places like the Tower, the University Star, Forbes, Substack. Even dug into some Reddit discussions and a YouTube video talking about toxic feminism.
So quite a mix. Our goal here really is to unpack what feminism is supposed to mean at its core.
And then look at why it gets so misunderstood. Maybe identify these global forces that seem to be pushing back against gender equality.
And also examine the surprising split we're seeing among younger people, Gen Z especially.
Crucially, we're staying impartial. We're just focusing on what's in this material, the ideas presented.
Okay, so where do we start? The definition seems like the logical place.
Yes, definitely. Because, like we said, this seems to be where a lot of the confusion begins. Fundamentally, what is feminism?
Well, the core definition is pretty straightforward. If you look it up, Merriam-Webster, for instance, it's basically the belief in and the fight for political, economic, and social equality of the sexes.
Equality.
Yeah, equality.
Yeah.
Equal rights, equal opportunities for everyone. And importantly, it's not about everyone being the same.
That's a key distinction. I like the analogy Forbes used. Like, imagine you have two students, one's physically weaker.
Yeah.
Would you say, okay, you're weaker so you don't get the same access to the teacher or the books or the computers?
Of course not. That would be ridiculous.
Right, so equality means equal access, equal opportunity, even if people have different strengths or characteristics.
Exactly. But that clarity just doesn't seem to translate into public perception. We saw some Pew Research data. It showed something like 94% of people think gender equality is important, which is great.
Okay, almost everyone.
Pretty much. But then you ask how many women actually call themselves feminists, it drops way down, like 12% to 26%, depending on the group.
Wow, that low.
Yeah. And for Gen Z men, it's only 43%. That's not just a gap, it's massive. A real disconnect between the ideal and the identity.
A huge chasm.
Yeah.
So why? Why the hesitation? Our sources, like the Tower and the University Star, they point to these common associations.
The negative ones.
Yeah, like feminism means being man-hating or extremist or angry or somehow not feminine.
We saw that with the Barbie movie reaction recently, didn't we? It had this clear feminist message, and immediately some people were labeling it anti-male propaganda.
That kind of instant negative framing, it says a lot.
And look, this kind of backlash isn't exactly new. The fight for women's rights, it's always faced resistance. Go back to Seneca Falls in 1848.
Right, the very beginning of the organized movement in the U.S.
Yeah, they were debating laws that made women inferior. Even the suffragettes, they were constantly caricatured and attacked.
So resistance has always been there. What's different now?
Well, it's the amplification, isn't it? New media, social media, you see it in Reddit threads, how a phrase like toxic masculinity gets twisted completely out of context.
Or how one really loud person online can suddenly become the face of the entire movement for some people.
Exactly. Whether or not they actually represent the broader goals, it just muddies the waters incredibly.
Okay, so against that backdrop, there's something maybe even more worrying emerging. This A-Line report you mentioned, Facing the Backlash.
Yes, it's quite sobering.
It paints this picture of a global deterioration in progress on women's rights. And it's not just random setbacks.
Yeah. No, the argument is that it's a coordinated, well-funded backlash, specifically targeting gender equality, LGBTQI plus diversity, and feminism itself.
And critically, the report links this directly to rising authoritarian trends around the world.
That coordination is the really alarming part. We're seeing very concrete examples of rights being rolled back. I mean, look at the U.S. overturning constitutional protection for abortion.
A huge one.
Or Uganda passing its anti-homosexuality bill last year with the death penalty for aggravated homosexuality.
Terrible.
And criminalizing even just the promotion of LGBTQI+ rights, or in Florida, you have laws restricting talk about gender diversity in schools.
These aren't isolated incidents, then, you're saying. It feels like a pattern.
It looks like a pattern of actively eroding rights that were previously established, yeah. And it goes beyond just laws.
How so?
Well, the A-Line Wren report points out that the whole global agreement, the consensus on gender justice, is fracturing. It's gotten so bad, the UN is even struggling to hold world conferences on women.
That's a major step backward. It really shows how contested this ground has become.
It really does. And underpinning a lot of this, according to the sources, are these deeply ingrained patriarchal gender norms. You know, the social rules that tend to favor men or masculinity.
Like what, specifically?
Well, UNDP data shows nearly half the world's population still believes men make better political leaders than women.
Half the population, wow.
Yeah, and these norms aren't just abstract ideas. They limit women's mobility, their autonomy, their economic opportunities in real, everyday ways. They contribute to this pervasive fear of violence that affects everything.
So how does that connect to, say, the political trends we're seeing? The rise of certain leaders?
Our sources draw a strong link. The rise of populist and authoritarian leaders, think Russia, India, Turkey, among others, often goes hand in hand with anti-gender policies.
Why is that?
They seem to use upholding family values or religious values as a way to boost their legitimacy. Sometimes they even twist human rights language to actually dismantle gains that were made previously. It's quite strategic. And social media just pours gasoline on the fire. The algorithms aren't neutral.
Right, you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, they can actively amplify extreme misogyny. Think about the manosphere, this whole online ecosystem.
Incels, men's rights activists.
Andrew Tate, all part of it. Hundreds of thousands of users globally. And while some might find community there, it often promotes this deeply anti-feminist, sometimes really misogynistic worldview.
And that spills offline.
It certainly can. We saw data from the Kenyan election in 2022. Women candidates face way more sexual violence, hate speech, and disinformation online than men did. It's a tool for suppression.
And this isn't just grassroots anger bubbling up online.
Well, there's that too, but the A-Line report points to serious money behind the anti-gender movements. Between 2013 and 2017, they estimate these movements got around $3.7 billion globally.
Billion, with a B.
Billion. Compare that to funding for LGBTQI+ movements, which was about $1.2 billion in the same period.
That's a huge disparity.
It really is, and it suggests this sophisticated, well-targeted funding, often from religious groups or transnational organizations, is fueling this backlash.
Okay, wow. That's the global picture.
Yeah.
Now, let's zoom in on something more recent and maybe quite surprising that our sources highlighted. This growing split between young men and young women.
Yes, specifically Gen Z. It's a phenomenon of political gender polarization that seems quite new, or at least newly accelerated.
What happened?
Essentially, young women are becoming significantly more progressive politically, while young men are either staying put ideologically or in many places actually shifting rightward, sometimes towards the populist right.
You have data on that.
Yeah, it's pretty stark. One Substack piece we read cited U.S. data showing women aged 18-30 are now 30 percentage points more liberal than men their age.
30 points.
30 points. And that gap has mostly opened up in just the last 10 years or so.
That's incredibly fast. Is it just the U.S.?
No. Similar big gaps in the U.K., about 25 points, and Germany, 30 points again. And South Korea is apparently off the charts, like a 50-point gap.
50. Good grief. And this shows up in how they vote.
Absolutely. Young men in South Korea were a key demographic in electing an overtly anti-feminist president. In Europe, young men are disproportionately fueling the rise of populist right parties.
So what's going on underneath these numbers? Why the divergence in attitudes?
Well, the sources suggest young women are increasingly embracing what you might call anti-patriarchal values. They're really concerned about issues like sexual harassment, reproductive rights.
Things directly affecting them.
Exactly. Meanwhile, research from Glocality suggests young men tend to prioritize values like competition, bravery, and honor more, and they express more skepticism about feminism.
And this links to how they see themselves.
It seems so. There was a survey from the Survey Center on American Life. It found almost half, 45% of young American men aged 18-29 feel they face gender-based discrimination.
They feel discriminated against.
Yes. And that number's jumped significantly just in the last few years. A lot of these young men agree with the statement that society seems to punish men just for acting like men.
That's a really powerful feeling, and it must drive their disengagement from feminism.
You'd think so. It's a perception we definitely need to understand, not just dismiss.
And this is where those online spaces, the manosphere, perhaps come in.
Precisely. As the Survey Center points out, even with controversial figures like Andrew Tate, these spaces are tapping into real anxieties young men have.
Like what?
Romantic rejection, feeling alienated, economic worries, loneliness. These are genuine concerns. And if the manosphere is addressing them, even if the advice is problematic.
Then it fills a void if constructive support isn't coming from elsewhere.
Exactly. It highlights a real gap.
Okay, so connecting this back to the broader picture, some sources talk about feminized leftism. What does that mean?
Well, the argument goes something like this. Events like the #MeToo movement, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, they definitely energize young women and push them leftward politically.
Understandably.
But at the same time, some argue that the way the left, perhaps loosely, used terms like toxic masculinity, it alienated some young men.
Made them feel attacked just for being men.
Potentially. Made them feel like they were seen as inherently flawed, maybe, and that their own unique challenges weren't being heard or addressed, which, if true, is a big strategic error if you want broad support for equality.
And this connects to another idea from the Substack piece, this concept of a second sexism.
Yeah, the idea that certain inequalities hit men and boys harder, and that these issues often get overlooked by the left, but maybe sometimes get acknowledged or even weaponized by the right.
What kind of issues are we talking about?
Things like higher suicide rates for men, or legal male infant genital mutilation in some countries, which is obviously treated very differently from FGM.
Right.
Or mandatory military conscription in places like South Korea, which mostly applies to men. These are significant issues affecting men disproportionately.
And universities, you mentioned, to play a role too, alongside this widening education gap.
Yes, there's a definite trend. Women are now the majority in higher education. 58% of U.S. undergraduates by 2020.
Okay.
And universities, which often have a generally more left-leaning culture, tend to foster egalitarian views. But within that environment, you see differences.
Like?
Women students tend to prioritize things like inclusivity, social justice. Men on campus might be more likely to emphasize free speech, maybe academic rigor. These different priorities can shape their political outlooks later on.
And that education gap spills over into the dating market.
That's the argument in the Substack piece, yeah. As more women get degrees, they might find fewer men with similar educational levels.
Okay.
And if you factor in what some call female hypergamy, this tendency statistically to seek partners perceived as equally or more successful, it can create friction.
So some men feel rejected, left behind.
That seems to be part of the narrative. Feeling rejected, maybe feeling that the system or institutions are unfair, which can then fuel resentment towards feminism.
And social media just throws fuel on all of this.
Massively. Jonathan Haidt's work, which our sources mentioned, talks about this. The algorithms create echo chambers.
Right. We only see things that confirm what we already think.
Pretty much. You get fed sensational stuff that reinforces your biases. So young men and women can end up living in, as Haidt puts it, different mental universes.
Where each side sees an exaggerated version of the injustices, their own sex faces, and maybe less of the other side's perspective.
Exactly. It just deepens the divide.
There was also a point about personality differences. That seemed counterintuitive.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Research suggests that basic personality differences between sexes, like women tending to score higher on empathy, agreeableness, egalitarianism on average.
Okay.
Paradoxically, those differences seem to get wider in more gender egalitarian society.
Not smaller.
Wider. And the Substack article connects this to politics. It suggests that because a lot of modern social justice discourse frames itself around caring for vulnerable groups, it naturally appeals more to those traits like empathy, which are slightly more common in women.
While men might lean towards valuing things like merit or individual freedom more strongly.
That's the idea. So personality itself might play a role in this political divergence.
Wow, okay. So this is incredibly complex. Given all these external pressures and internal divides, what about feminism itself? Are there internal critiques, debates within the movement?
Oh, absolutely. It's not monolithic at all. That YouTube video we look at, the open letter, it argued that some modern pop culture, specifically looking at examples from urban India, misrepresents female empowerment.
How so?
By portraying it mainly as like casual sex, drinking, smoking, showing female characters maybe cheating on partners but still being framed as victims. The video labels this toxic feminism. It sees it as this sort of left-wing ecosystem hijacking the movement, promoting man-hating or entitlement, and maybe ignoring women who embody more traditional values, like Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, for example.
So a critique about what empowerment actually looks like and who gets to define it.
Exactly. And this ties into another critique about priorities. You see this pop up in Reddit discussions or articles like the one in The Perspective.
Which is?
That sometimes feminist discourse seems to focus on, well, what some see as lesser issues. Things like manspreading on the subway or office air conditioning temperatures.
Okay.
Now, those might be annoying, but the critics argue that focusing on them makes the movement seem trivial. It distracts from the really huge life and death global issues.
Like female infanticide, child marriage, FGM, human trafficking.
Exactly. Issues that desperately need global attention and resources. The argument is that focusing on the smaller stuff can actually hurt the movement's broader appeal and effectiveness.
That leads into a really fundamental debate, doesn't it? Equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome.
Yes, our sources really highlight this distinction. Equality of opportunity giving everyone a fair start, a level playing field that's pretty widely accepted. People see it as crucial for individuals to succeed.
But equality of outcome.
That's much more contentious. The idea that society should ensure everyone finishes in the same place, regardless of talent, effort, choices, market forces.
Some argue that ignores individual differences and maybe isn't even desirable.
Right. And pushing too hard for equality of outcome without careful thought can alienate people who might otherwise support equality of opportunity. It's a fine line to walk.
And then there's that persistent perception we mentioned earlier that feminism is just anti-man. How do you counter that?
It's a major challenge. Forbes acknowledged that many men do genuinely fear losing status or think feminism wants to tear them down.
But the argument is that true feminism, the equality-focused kind, actually helps men too.
Exactly, by dismantling those rigid patriarchal norms. The Tower mentions how these norms harm men too. Think about the pressure not to show emotion, not to seek help, which contributes to those higher suicide rates.
So breaking down those stereotypes benefits everyone.
That's the core idea. Addressing men's concerns, showing how equality lifts everyone, is crucial for building broader support.
Okay, so bringing this all together, how do we move forward? What do the sources suggest for building a more inclusive future, countering the backlash?
Well, the Align report and others offer a few key strategies. First, broadening the narrative. Really emphasizing how feminism, by tackling rigid gender roles, benefits all genders.
Make it clear it's not a zero-sum game.
Precisely. Second, tackling the digital space. We need to think about regulating social media platforms to reduce the spread of misogyny and online violence, address the algorithmic amplification.
That's a huge task.
It is, but essential. Third, fostering real dialogue. Professor Rebecca Ross, quoted in the University Star, said something powerful. Everyone has the ethical obligation to understand how this oppression operates.
So encouraging critical thinking, asking questions, actually listening to different views respectfully.
Yes. Instead of just shutting down conversations we find difficult, we also need to support diverse movements on the ground, women's resistance, LGBTQI+ groups, and actively engage men as allies. Show them they have a stake in equality too.
And it's not going to happen overnight.
No, the Align report really stresses this needs a long-term vision. Yes, we need structural changes, institutional reforms, but we also need things that genuinely inspire people, that change hearts and minds over time.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here in this deep dive. It's clear feminism, defined simply as equality, is, well, not simple in practice.
Not at all. There's that core definition, but then this huge perception gap. There's a real coordinated global backlash happening tied to authoritarianism.
And this surprising and quite stark political split opening up between young men and women, driven by a whole tangle of factors: social media, education gaps, maybe even personality differences.
And we've touched on the internal debates too, critiques about toxic feminism, arguments over priorities, the opportunity versus outcome debate. It's a messy, complex picture.
It really is. Which leaves us and you with a final thought to chew on. Given all these different interpretations, all the challenges, the backlash, the polarization, how can we actually have a better conversation about gender equality?
A conversation that's nuanced, that's inclusive.
Yeah. One that takes seriously the persistent inequalities women and minorities still face, but also addresses the legitimate concerns and anxieties being voiced, including by young men. How do we do that without letting all the noise, the anger, the mischaracterizations completely drown out the goal of a genuinely fair and equitable future for everyone?